Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cure for the Common Game. Today is day number 96 in the 100 Days of EDH. Well, we didn't start off as 100 Days of EDH, did we? We started off 100 Days of Magic, but this is an EDH channel, and that's kind of what I do. I realized yesterday was kind of something different, but that was that challenge that had been a long time coming. But anyway, today let's talk about Lorwyn. Lorwyn was one heck of a set. It came out in October of 2007, and it had 301 cards, 80 rare, 80 uncommon, 121 commons, and 20 basic lands. And it did a lot of cool stuff, so let's get into it. First and foremost, it gave us the Fab Five, the very first original 5 Planeswalkers. They were all monocolor. Each color got one. And since this was the block before, Mythic Rarity didn't exist. So they printed them at rare. And a Johnny Goldmane, card number 1 for the set. I don't feel like I have to read a Johnny Goldmane because y'all know what it does. For our purpose, I like it in the, there's a couple of different options here. Obviously that +1 is kind of meh for me, but nowadays we have gotten so many white and or green cards. Oh, shoot. And others, we got black ones coming out soon, but +1/+1 counter cards, and the ability to put a counter on your entire team, and they gain vigilance that turn. I typically run a Johnny in like those hardcore life gain decks because one of my favorite things to do, because I'm still a noob, is to get that avatar and put like a spirit link on it, so it doubles your life and doubles its power and toughness every turn, and then you give it double strike and it's raw. Anyway, yeah. And if the table lets that happen, it's whatever. Anyway, we also got a cycle of commands. Now, I don't know that I don't know that we're gonna talk about all 5 commands, but the original commands were monocolor. I know they did some in cons, they did some others, or dragons, or whatever it was. But these were kind of hard to read. I love the way they do them now with bullet points, but all the commands had 4 options, and that's one thing that we love in Commander, since we play typically a single game format and we don't have access to sideboards and whatnot on a normal basis. But the option here, destroy all artifacts, destroy all enchantments, destroy all little creatures, destroy all big creatures. I've never drawn an austere command and not had a use for it. So we get 2 of those, and most of the time you can engineer it to where it's extremely beneficial for you. Now, this was the first set that gave us Battle Mastery, and I love this card. If I am playing any deck that has white in it, that cares at all about the possibility of commander damage, I am probably running a Battle Mastery. Also, the creatures that say, when it deals combat damage, of course, double strike, it's going to deal combat damage twice, so that whatever effect happens twice. That's why we all like putting a Jit on a double strike creature. But I want to talk about Battle Mastery simply because of the prevalence of auras and enchantments now. Brigid, she's the legendary Kithkin, and even though I believe I built Brigid as tribal Kithkin. Now, Kithkin so far they are from Lorwyn. There were no humans on Lorwyn. It was a fairy book, a fairy tale storybook world. There were no real problems. It was just kind of like minor squabblings, It was a very picturesque world. So it's just a matter of time before they blow it up, right? Anyway, the Kithkin were the kind of the white tribe. This was a very, very tribal-centric set. I believe Lorwyn supported 8 tribes, which is kind of weird in that there's only 5 colors, but they cross some. And anyway, but Kithkin were the, way back in Legends, of course, there was Amro Kithkin, and they made it a race, and we have Brigid. Now, Burrington Forgetender, 1 mana, 1/1 pro-red Kithkin. Now, the reason why I love this for EDH is that sacrifice ability. We play aristocrat-style decks are very, very popular, and the ability to sacrifice a creature at will on its own card is abusable. But even when it has this ability, prevent all damage a red source. Now, granted, you can't do it at will. You've got to have but what is that? Chain Reaction, Blasphemous Act. That's a single source. Yep. Crib Swap. Now, this was the card we didn't know we needed until we got it. And I think, even though it's uncommon, I think all my dozens of copies are used. Because Crib Swap is amazing. Changeling is something that Lorwyn introduced. Because they were so heavy in the tribal theme, they needed a way to kind of, like I said, there's only 301 cards in the set, or 181, because, I mean, let's face it, do you really count basic lands? They don't add anything. But, so, they were going so wide with tribes, it was they had trouble going deep with them and getting enough creature types, so they made the Changeling mechanic, and shapeshifters in this block had Changeling so that they were all creature types, so you could draft them and play them with whatever tribe you were working on. Now, that being said, let's address the other thing on the card, Tribal. We first saw our hint of Tribal in Future Sight, obviously. I know Tarmogoyf mentioned it like they mentioned Planeswalker. So, Tribal is a super type. Or type, rather. It's kind of... And here's what I don't understand about Tribal. They did it, they made it, they had 4 sets of it, and now they're saying it doesn't work. They won't make new Tribal cards. They will... Every now and then in supplementary sets, they will reprint a Tribal card. Like they did a little bit for the Eldrazi in the Eldrazi-centric sets, but they didn't do a whole lot. And now they're saying they can't do it because it doesn't work. I don't understand. Now, granted, I'm not a game designer, but from our end, it totally works because I'm still playing them. But Crib Swap exiles target creature and they get a 1/1 Changeling. So that is amazing to get rid of indestructible creatures. Mirror Entity is, in my opinion, the best Changeling they made, and I still run it. It's one of those that when I see this card in a store's case, I'm going to buy it because I know I won't have a problem fitting it in a deck somewhere, especially if it's a white tribe of something, because, you know, it comes down for 3, more than likely less than that if you've got, you know, soldiers cost 1 less or whatever, and their base power and toughness becomes whatever you want it to be. It's so good. Oblivion Ring, another way to temporarily get rid of indestructible things. It's beautiful. I mean, and of course there's some wacky combos. Oblivion Ring was kind of the hallmark of it. They've made several offshoots of Oblivion Ring since then, but my one favorite thing was getting, 3 O-rings and just looping it infinitely, and then having like a enchantments for creatures card and then a pandemonium, and it was dumb. Anyway, Wise and Sin. Now, we had what I'm going to call champions, because that's kind of the first couple of cards that we had back in Alpha. That's what they were called for tribes, was champions. This is the Kithkin champion, and yes, that's right. These were uncommon. Some were uncommon, some were rare. Typically, the rare ones had another ability that was pretty good on it, but 2 mana for a Kithkin, Wise and Sin was pretty good. Amiiboid Changeling. Now, this was another good Changeling. This actually appeared in the foil sliver deck. They did 3 of those all foil decks way back when, 1 per year. Premium deck series is what it was called. And the very first one was Slivers. If you've never seen it, it's a gorgeous item if you like foils, because the whole deck is foil. But it's more or less an EDH starter kit. Especially the Sliver one, because you get the legendary and you get a lot of one-ofs, and it's great. But Amiiboid Changeling, the ability to change creature types or lose creature types was a huge deal, and still is. Cryptic Command, the command. This was, hold on, I want to count the words in the text box. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. This card has 24 words in the text box. We'll get to why that matters in a minute. This is the Blue Wrath, as they call it. This is a counterspell and a win condition all in of itself. It slices it. It does everything. You get to counter a spell, bounce a permanent, tap all creatures you don't control, or draw a card. Now, even at probably the weakest counterspell, draw a card, that's what? Dismiss, and that's 4 mana? I mean, and that's as bad as it gets. A lot of times this was just a counter that spell, tap your team, you're done, because you probably tapped out for that spell. You're done, and I'm going to alpha swing you and win. That's how it works. Now, the reason why I counted the words on it is 24 words is a lot for a card for them to make a textless promo of. Now, Magic Player Rewards was a thing way back when. It looks like they may be trying to resurge that frame because the new Grand Prix Lightning Bolt is kind of like that. It's full art textless. Now, they made, you played in tournaments, FNMs and whatever, and you earned so many points, and they sent you cards in the mail, textless cards like Disenchant and Giant Growth and Harrow and whatever. And then every so often, once you got so many points, they sent you a foil. Now, the first one they did was Wrath of God. The second one that they did was Damnation. And the third one they did was Cryptic Command. Now, Wrath of God and Damnation, everybody knows what they do, and it's a very simple card. But even a lot of experienced players, unless you are like a hardcore modern player, ask them, what does Cryptic Command do? Exactly. And that's a card that doesn't need to be textless. Anyway. Force Fruition is, of course, the go-to enchantment for milling people out. I mean, because it only applies to an opponent. When they play a spell, they draw 7. And if you've got, obviously it's a favorite in Nekuzar style decks or Underworld Dreams things, things of that nature. It's a beast of a card. Guile. Now, Guile is found a really good home in our friend who was that Baral. Was he the counterspell guy? It's been so long since I built those decks, but can't be blocked by 3 or more creatures, or except by 3 or more creatures. That's amazing. Don't get me wrong. 6 mana, 6/6, but that's not the reason why we played him. If you would counter a spell instead, you get it. You get to cast it for the free. Now, all the elemental incarnations, there was 1 per color. This is another cycle. Had that last line when it's put new graveyard from anywhere, shuffle it in because they didn't want you reanimating it. But that keep what you counter deal that was insane in a counter heavy deck. Still is. Here's our blue walker, Jace Beleren. This was the first Jace. This was the first one to actually be called Baby Jace. Now, I know there's the Flip Walker has kind of taken that name, but this will forever, for me, be Baby Jace because it's the very first one. And it's a fine card. It really is. I didn't know then, none of us knew then that this would be their Mickey Mouse and that they would be like, yeah, Jace. Now, but we should have, because let's face it, blue is a very popular Magic color. It may be the most popular, and I can tell you why. We are Magic players. Everybody who cares about this game would classify themselves probably as a Magic player. And there's a certain amount of strategy that we like, or else we probably wouldn't even play this game. There's a certain level of thinking, and the Magic player psyche kind of lines up with Blue's color pie philosophy. So that's why a lot of people just gravitate toward Blue, because we're Magic players. And yeah, I'm not saying everybody. There are quite a few people who don't like Blue or only like certain aspects of it. But yeah, it's the card draw color. We play a card game. We like to draw cards. And that's what original Baby Jace here did. Meryl Regery. The Merfolk, let's see, so far we've covered Kithkin, Merfolk. You play a Merfolk, you may tap or untap target permanent, so that's pretty sweet, especially if you've got your permanent is, either drawing a card, producing obscene amounts of mana, whatever. And it's play a Merfolk spell, so your tribal Merfolk stuff works. The other blue tribe was fairies. Now, when we got Lorwyn, we knew fairies were pretty decent. When we got Morningtide, they became busted. Lorwyn also introduced the champion mechanic, which is kind of different, kind of unique. It was supposed to be a drawback, and a lot of times it is, unless you actually build around it and break it. But a flash flying 4/4 that taps all lands when it comes into play. Yeah, see, that's really good. And the next set's going to give us probably the best token generator ever made. So, that was really good. Muldrifter. Evoke is another ability. Now, Evoke only appears on creatures, and you can cast a creature for its casting cost, and it does its thing. Muldrifter is a 5 mana 2/2 flyer. When it comes into play, you draw 2 cards. That seems about right. Or you can play it as effectively a sorcery speed divination. Wait a minute. I think divination is sorcery anyway, council sword, whatever. 3 mana, draw 2 cards, because the creature comes into play and then instantly dies or is sacrificed. So sacrifice matters because those cards that say when you sacrifice, do a thing, that's not bad. Muldrifter's a favorite of Reanimator decks or like Hell's Caretaker decks or what have you, because when it just comes into play, you draw 2 cards. It's pretty good. Now, Pestermite has seen a resurgence lately because of Prime Speaker Vanifer. Sure, why not? It's a flash flying 2/1 that taps or untaps permanent when it comes in, so it's not bad. This is a set that gave us Ponder, and I have to put Ponder in here. There's a good friend of mine who loves Ponder, probably his favorite Magic card ever. But it's really close to the infamous Brainstorm. You look at the top 3, you can put them back in any order. You get to shuffle if you want to, but either way, you're going to get to draw a card. It's a great card selection card. Scion of Una is, of course, the fairy champion with flash and flying. And, the upside of your team gets Shroud. What? Shroud? Just all your... Yeah. Sower of Temptation. Now, I can't really decide on... It looks like they were trying to make a control magic and put it on a creature thinking that would make it worse. Because creatures are more vulnerable than enchantments. We know that. But typically with an aura, you run the risk of 2-for-1ing yourself. So there's that. But when it's a control magic type effect, you still kind of 2-for-1 yourself when they get rid of it. And Sword of Temptation, while a good card, that's kind of the style decks that I played in, is the I'm going to, steal your stuff anyway. Spellstutter Sprite. Where X is the number of fairies you control, this is a counterspell, folks. X or less. So it doesn't have to be hard, that number. If you've got 5 fairies, you're in pretty good place. Tribal fairies, I don't know. Is that what I did with Una? Have I built Una? I can't remember. Cairn Wanderer, good changeling. The Cairn Wanderer looks at the graveyard. If there's a card with flying there, he gets it, and the same is true for Fear, First Strike, Double Strike, Death Touch, Haste, Landwalk, Lifelink, Protection, Reach, Trample, Shroud, and Vigilance. Oh my gosh. So, ideally, to get the max effect out of him, you're going to want to play with creatures with, more than one keyword. And if you're playing a Reanimator type strategy or whatnot, he becomes a Smurf. Share and share alike. Dread is the black elemental incarnation and absolutely insane. Fear is really good. Of course, that means it can't be blocked except for by black or artifact creatures. They would later, change that or stop using that and start using Intimidate. But Whenever a creature deals damage to you, destroy it. Whoa, really good. Knucklebone Witch. Now, goblins were a supported tribe. They were essentially the bad guy tribe of this particular plane. But a goblin you control is put into a graveyard. You get +1/+1 counter on Knucklebone. That's pretty good, because let's face it, goblins die. That's what they do. Heck, half the time we sacrifice our own goblins. So, Liliana Vess. Oh, makes me sad. 5 mana for original Lily. We still play her. I mean, EDH, we love her. And granted, we probably only +1 it just so that we can keep using the Vampiric Tutor -2. Now, there have been a couple of times where, I've gotten off the ultimate. This was back in the day where they all had an actual legitimate ultimate. But she's really good. And as far as the trailer was amazing. I'm sure y'all have seen it by now. I think 8 million people have. Well, I say that. Probably 15 of those views are mine. But technically, we don't see her dying. I realize that's wishful thinking on my part. Profane Command, the Black Command. Here again, 4 modes, great versatility. All modes have something to do with X, and they are great. Shriek Maw is the other awesome evoke creature. There was a bunch, there's some that destroyed artifacts or enchantments or whatever, but Muldrifter and Shriek Maw were the 2 that people loved, because this has got terror. You can just cast a sorcery speed terror, or you can have a 3/2 evasive guy. And this is really good because it's in, reanimation color, so you can keep bringing it back to keep popping creatures, and then, have kind of a little bit of a threat there. Thoughtseize. Yeah, this is an EDH set review, but it felt kind of bad to do it without Thoughtseize being one of the hallmark cards from the set. We don't really embrace Thoughtseize like Modern does. This is the card that's supposed to keep Modern fair and honest, whatever. I never really saw the appeal of it because, let's face it, I've been an EDH player for as long as I can remember. Or casual before EDH started, so I would play tournament scenes every once in a while, As the standard season intrigued me, I would get into it, but I would always buy and I would always play, but most of the time it was just casual. But it's a great card, don't get me wrong, but unless we are dedicating ourselves to discard or a very fragile combo that we cannot let get disrupted, we probably don't care that much about Thoughtseize. Aisling the Pilgrim is a legendary creature, and the running joke used to be, and it may still be, was, I've got Aisling in 99 mountains. Well, I've got that deck. That's the Aisling deck. Although it's not 99 mountains, I think I may have 5 or 10 actual cards in there. And as far as the lands, I have as many weird lands as possible. Utility lands that are not just mountains. So the trick is to general damage out with Aisling, because 2 mana, put a counter on it, and then if it's the 3rd time, you remove all, and it deals that much damage to each creature, each player. So the idea was fast mana production, put 2 counters on it every turn, and then you just bash face with it. And if you need to, you can blow it up, essentially for 6 mana and wipe the board. Chandra Nalaar. Man, it took them a long time to get a good Chandra. We had several that were okay, but more that were just bad. It's kind of a feel bad when you spend 5 mana. Yeah, she comes in with 6 loyalty, but you +1 to deal 1 damage. What? And that ultimate 10 damage to, a player and all their stuff. I mean, it's not bad, but I don't know. This one, once we realized we started getting other planeswalkers, we realized what were good and what were bad. But at the time, this was the only red planeswalker we'd ever seen. So, Hamlet back Goliath. Giants were another supported tribe in this block. So, the reason why I chose this one, and it's a big silly monster, and I know it. It's just a beater. It doesn't have any kind of evasion. But odds are, if you're playing this, you're either playing tribal giants, or you're playing in Gruul, or you're playing something that's heavy creatures, because you're gonna give it trample. I mean, that's just the way. Or you're running like a fling deck or what have you. It's really good in a fling deck. But another creature, yours, anybody's, just another creature, and it just starts getting ridiculous. Let's not factor in doubling season. Heat Shimmer. Now this is a card red typically doesn't get. Now granted, it's a temporary token, but hey, I mean, for 3 mana, you get a token that's a copy of target creature. And of course, at the end of the turn, you got to exile it, but it gives you the turn with this probably big nasty creature, and then you can always sack it for gain before it exiles, you know. Incandescent Soulstoke is the elementals were another tribe. This champion is actually rare because of the other ability, you know, to put an elemental creature card from your hand into play. It gains haste, you know. They burn bright, they burn out quick. So that's kind of what that represents to me. Dauntless Dowerbark. Now, Tree Folk was legit. I ran mono green Tree Folk, and it's just, yeah, it's a little slow rolling it at first because you don't start really getting there to 3-4 mana. But Dauntless Dowerbark is amazing. Equal number of forest plus the number of Tree Folk. What? So minimum is going to be a 4/4 for 4, right? I mean, and you're probably playing other Tree Folk or ramp or whatever for our purposes. This is nuts. Even if you don't have any other Tree Folk, I mean, you're going to want 1 or 2 just to give it trample, or a Changeling to give it trample. I mean, I love Dauntless Dowerbark. And we have Elvish Harbinger. The tribes had most of them had a Harbinger. And what it was a go get tribe to go get a member of the tribe. Now this one had a tap for any color mana, and it was from elves. Elves were a supported tribe as well. Elvish Promenade, my favorite tribal elf spell, because it just lets you double up, especially when typically with elves, you're going to flood out the board, and that's, it's good and it's bad. I mean, we don't like to do that because we don't like to overcommit, obviously, and to risk just a blowout and restart our game with no hand. But Elvish Promenade is the real deal. Garruk Wildspeaker, man, awesome. 4 mana, but the +1, you got to have 4 mana, but you're probably going to +1 and untap 2 lands anyway. So, but that ultimate being the overrun was really, really amazing. And I still use it. Every copy of Garruk Wildspeaker that I own is in a deck. I mean, it really is. Especially it ramps you to play bigger creatures faster, and then it rewards you for playing creatures. So that's amazing. Immaculate Magistrate is the ultimate reward for playing tribal elves. Elves typically go wide, and this allows you to go both tall and wide. You get to pick a creature, and now this is a tap ability, so you can do this if you don't swing with the Magistrate. One of my favorite things to do is swing with all the other elves and see how the blocks go and see where I want to put those counters. It's also really good with stuff that untaps creatures. Imperious Perfect. Now, why this one didn't merit a rarity, I don't understand. By the way, like 10 years ago, I built my entertainment center. It's a big, elaborate system of shelves that's built into the wall. there has been an Imperious Perfect sitting up there, just sitting up there with the DVDs up, on one of the top shelves for like 6 years. The joke never gets old, never, because it's up there in plain sight, but all the different colors from the different DVD covers and whatever, it's hard to see. And every now and then somebody will look at it and they'll see it and they're like, you got an Imperious Perfect up there? And I say, yes, that's my elf on a shelf. Anyway, 3 mana 2/2 and your other elves get 1/1, and then you spend a green mana and tap and you make a 1/1 elf, which now is a 2/2 because of what she does. It's amazing. Jagged Scar Archers. Now, if you're doing the elf thing, or a lot of times just the green thing, it's really hard to deal with flyers. And we play a format that is dominated by flyers. I mean, just the Kalia creature types, Angel, Demon, Dragon, are very, very popular. So the ability here to shoot things down, and it's huge. It's power times equal number of elves you control. That's why I wish Promenade is so good. And the ability to just shoot down flyers is amazing. And there are other cards that just help that as well. Oh, I skipped one. Lignify. Now, this is our favorite. That doesn't matter anymore. I don't care that it has Indestructible. I don't care that it's a giant Eldrazi. If I can target it, it's a Tree Folk. It's beautiful. Oh, and it's tribal, so you can search it up with things that search for Tree Folk cards or whatever. Primal Command, of course, is the green command. It's awesome. Not as awesome as the others, but it's still decent. Root Grapple is one of my favorite removal spells. Now, yeah, it's 5 mana. It's an instant speed, but you get to destroy any non-creature permanent. The only drawback is it has to be a non-creature. Well, I guess 5 mana is a drawback too. But if we're playing mono green, we ain't got a whole lot of choices for targeted removal for anything. That's not a creature. Typically, creature's not a problem. We're just going to be bigger than them anyway. Timber Protector. Other tree folk and forest you control are indestructible. Okay, and the champion? Sign me up. Vigor. Oh, this was the elemental incarnation. Now, I liked Guile, but I liked Vigor a lot because if damage would be dealt to a creature you control, so that's combat damage, you prevent it and they get that many 1/1 counters. What? It just swings combat so much in your favor, and each successive turn that Vigor is out, it gets harder and harder to deal with. Rin's Run Packmaster. Now, I just put this in a sleeve yesterday. I'm building new Voja, or new Tolsimir that hasn't come out yet. Does the wolf thing, and this is a really good way to get some wolves out there. Now, I'm going to have to run some elves, obviously, because I've got a champion and elf. But, I'll do that for Man Excel. And now that our challenge is over with, I have a 60-card deck full of elves that are pretty decent. Brian Stoutarm. Yeah, Giants. This is the Giant Tribal deck, and Brian Stoutarm that was way, way back there. I'm having trouble remembering. That was deck number 55, so I probably need to go back and rebuild it and update it. It does not have a deck list yet, so that's something I really need to do. But it's good. Lifelink on a creature that throws creatures is really pretty decent. Now, Door in a Siege Tower was the first time we'd seen anything like this. To what do they call it? Butt fight. It's each creature, so this messed with your opponents as well. It just altered combat math. It made you want to play Tree Folk or high toughness creatures, and it made cards like what was that? Not Tireless Tracker, Tireless Tribe. From way, way back, it was a 1/1. You discarded the card to give it +0/+4. It was sick with Doran. Gaddock Teague was one of the early most hated commanders. I mean, and still today, he's not real. You know, if you build Gaddock Teague and you flip it down there, you're kind of a target unless there's something worse at the table. And let's face it, it's hard to get worse than Gaddock Teague. I mean, yeah, you can play all the creatures you want to, but there's so much you can't play. And yeah, that was designed to keep out the wraths, and it does it very well. Horde of Notions is the legendary elemental at 5 color. I have tribal elementals built with Horde of Notions. I mean, it is what it is. Nath. Now, Nath is a beast. 5 mana for 4/4 elf warrior. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may have target opponent discard a card at random. Now, random discards is something they brought back because a lot of times you let the opponent choose and discard, but this was at random. And then it has a discard trigger of get an elf. So it's the deck kind of builds itself. If you build it around the commander, you're going to want discard and you're going to want elf tribe. So I mean, there was a lot of black green elves in this block. They kind of brought elves to black again. Sig River Guide. For Azorius, I mean, 2/2 Island Walk Commander for 2s. I mean, it's not bad. But then target merfolk you control, including him, gains protection from the color of your choice. So if we're playing with, the heavy white side to make sure that we've got enough to activate that, you could very easily do a Voltron thing here, because you can bring Sig out on turn 2 and just start chipping away. People don't think nothing about two commander damage, but once you start giving it protection from all the colors, it starts to matter, especially when you Voltron him up. Now, Wart, at the beginning of your upkeep, you get a goblin from your graveyard to your hand, so all those goblins that we're sacrificing, we can get back. Dwidwin the Biting Gale is, of course, the legendary fairy, flash flying, and, you can pay some life and mana to get her back to your hand. That's pretty decent. Now, Cofferner's Urn is... I've used this, but you got to be careful with it. And Cofferner's Urn is whenever a creature with toughness 4 or greater is put into your graveyard from play, you may remove it from the game, of course. At the end of turn, if 3 or more cards have been removed from the game this way, sack it, and those cards. Now, this will trigger on your opponent's creatures as well. So be very wary of that. Dolmen Gate for 2 mana. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to attacking creatures you control. So my creatures can't die in combat? Sign me up. Oh, and it's playable off a Soul Ring? Okay. I'm good with it. Whoa, you want to talk about a card that's gotten some hype lately. Rings of Brighthearth is outstanding. It was good the day it saw print. And every time they do anything that is an activated ability, it just surges in value. And then when they announce they're releasing a set with 36 Planeswalkers, it gets nuts, because the cost of those abilities is the loyalty payment. Whether it's adding or subtracting, that's the cost. You're activating that ability by paying that cost, hence the colon. And then you can pay 2 to duplicate that. So if you are ultimating a Planeswalker, you can spend 2 mana with the rings and ultimate twice. Crazy. It has other uses as well. Rune Stalactite is... it's a good kind of... if you're playing heavy equipment and you need just another cheap equipment, I recommend Rune Stalactite, simply because it is... it takes advantage of a lot of tribal synergies that you're not playing. If somebody is playing elves and they have an elvish champion that says all elves gain forest walk, well, you know what? My guy's now an elf and you can't block him. Or whatever. I mean, there's a bunch of them that people rely on that play tribes. I know, I'm one of them. Thorn of Amethyst, of course, goes along with that... what do they call that? Is that stacks? Am I calling that right? The taxes deck, where everything costs more. I don't know, but This is a popular card in those style decks as well. Now, 1,000-Year Elixir is another one. I just bought one of these. I couldn't find it locally, and so I TCG played it. And here's the problem with building so many decks at one time. I bought it. I bought this and a Michaelson's Lattice. And I can't remember what decks I bought it for. So I've just got them kind of chilling right now, and I'm like, yeah, I've got, 40 or 50 decks over there in various stages of completion, so I'll eventually figure out what it's for. We got lands. We got tribal lands. They're not actually tribal, but they are. They're rare, and they're going to come into play tapped unless you show a member of the chosen tribe. Like this is red and white, so it was giants. The red-black one was goblin. The green-black one was... now, there weren't all 10 of these. So they didn't do all the possible combinations. They just did the ones that suited their tribe. Now, Mosswort Bridge is a different... It was part of the Hideaway cycle. There was each color got one. And this was the one I played the most out of. And to be honest with you, the one I see the most played. Although it's like they look for a reason to print Windbrisk Heights. But anyway... they all had the Hideaway, which was you got a secret card you could play later for cheaper with the bottom ability. Now, the green one was super easy to attain because it's, getting 10 power worth of creatures in green is not hard to do. Secluded Glen is the blue-black fairy show land. Now, there was a cycle of vivid lands. They were all uncommon, and they come into play tapped with 2 charge counters on them. Now, they tapped for whatever color they were. But then you could remove a counter to get a mana of any color all as well. You tap remove. So this is a favorite in proliferate style decks, which it looks like we're getting another healthy dose of proliferate cards, which is going to... That's why Traxxas soared through the roof, and is why Super Friends is going to become a real thing in probably every single format. But so I see in our format the Vivid lands going up. They all started with Vivid, and Vivid Crag, Vivid whatever, Meadow, and it may be too late to get our hands on these affordably, because as I remember, they hadn't ever been real cheap except for when they were released. We have kind of propped up the price here, but I'm betting, I haven't looked in years, I'm betting these have slowly started to escalate. Of course, the Merfolk show land was white-blue. And that is what we have got for Lorwyn. There was a bunch more I could have talked about. I only did 1 card of certain cycles, and I could have done all... I could have done all 301 cards, because even the lands were gorgeous. The art was wonderful. It was all, fairy tale and the perfect world. And I think that's why so many people have fond memories of it. People typically like tribal anyway. And there's a lot of fond memories of a world that Wizards has not destroyed or ruined yet. And it looks like we have to take Ravnica out of that too, because, yeah, it looks like Ravnica is never going to be the same. But anyway, I do appreciate y'all watching, and we've got, 3 days left now? So I will see y'all tomorrow.